Yeah, good morning, everyone. So, yesterday we learnt about how to handle form. So, we are learning about third party, how to use it. So, yesterday we discussed about the React form concept and one problem with the way how React handles the form. So, it requires a lot of event binding concepts. So we need to use too many event binding options. We need to write a lot of functions to collect the data and handle the data. To handle in a simple way with more interactions, usually we learnt about formic library. So we learned how to use a formic library. So formic library, what is the point about this library? It will provide all predefined functions. So functions are already built in. We need to use those built-in functions and we need to implement. And this formic library have a lot of things we will see which are regularly used in our projects. First, last session, what we learned, how to design a form and how we collect the data from the form. For that, what are the basic rules? While working with formic library, so some basic rules I will define here. Means yesterday already we designed a form. The syntax I explained. The basic rules, first important rule is every form element must have a name attribute. Must have a name attribute. Must have a name attribute. Every form element must have a name attribute. You already learnt about HTML forms. What you learnt about HTML forms, in HTML forms, a form cannot submit the data of any value until or unless there is a name for that element. If a form element is not having a name, then form cannot submit its value. That's a basic rule of HTML. That is the reason here formic also follows the same rule. So formic will not allow to submit the form until or unless it is having a name. We have to make sure that every form element have a name. Next important is formic initial values. Initial values must match with the name defined for element. That means what initial values you given and what is the name that you given, they should match. Formic initial values must match with the name. That means formic have initial values object. In that we have some price. So now what you have to do, you need to define a text input type is text. So name is equal to price. It should match with it. What are the names you given as initial values? The same names we need to maintain for elements. Actually, when you just define name and you configure the name initial values, here one important architecture is working in the background. Generally, freshers no need to know that, but for experienced people, they may ask this question. The question is nothing but what is the technique, what is the architecture behind the communication between the initial values and the name. That means for experienced people, they ask the question like, what is the connection? How it is going to work? That means you given a name and the name is what? Price. And you are saying that initial values also maintain the same. Then automatically it can collect the value from this and use it here. That means what is the connection between this? That means in software programming, remember, in software programming, in which place you keep the resource, what name you give to the resource, this matters. If you misplace any resource in a different location, it is unable to communicate. Already we saw that all images we need to keep in which folder? Public. JSON files also we need to keep in which folder? Public. If you keep in any another folder, it is unable to communicate. That means there is a background configuration for that. So in software programming, any technology, Java, .NET, anywhere, in software programming, if there is an architecture of where you place, what name you give, if it is matters, if it matters, then we call that mechanism as, we call it as model binding. We call that mechanism as model binding. Model binding is a mechanism in software programming where the name and the location mapping happens. That means where you keep the resource, what name you give to the resource, they matter. If you mismatch, it is unable to communicate. The architecture behind this is called as what? Model binding. So it uses a model binding mechanism. Model binding is nothing but from where the data have to come and where it have to store. So data have to come from a name called price and it should store in the initial value called price. So there is no connection physically you can see, but internally there is a connection through a technique called model binding. So you have to follow this. So name is binded with the initial values using a technique known as model binding. We call this as model binding. Now, another important is in the rules, every form element must have a name and the names must match with the initial values. Another important point is every element must have on change event mapping to formic dot handle change. Why this is required? So why every element must have on change event? You know the reason. Why element needs on change event mandatory? Because in React, it has supports only one-way binding and two-way binding can be managed only by on change. So why it is required? Because on change is the only event that handles two-way binding. Two-way binding. So every element must have on-change event mapping to the formic. So you can configure implicitly also on change. I will show you the technique how it is managed. So while working with forms, these are the basic rules. Means especially when you are dealing with the formic. So formic can use the following events. It can use the events handle change. It can use handle blur, and it can use handle submit. These are the built-in events available for formic. So you don't have like key up, key down, because you learned lot of events. All events are not supported by formic. Formic internally have these, but manually you can write. That means formic don't have key up, key down and all, but if you want, you can write. Right? That also I will explain how we can write our events and how they manage, how they work. So this is our yesterday's example. In this example, what we are doing is, so we are collecting the data from the form and we are submitting the data. For that, we used a simple technique of formic library provides a hook called use formic. This use formic hook have initial values and it is going to have what on submit. On submit will collect the values and use the values. These values we can use anywhere. Later we will use them to submit into APIs and all. We will learn about that. So initially, when you are configuring a form, one more, submit must be used for form. Form have to use that on submit. And remember, submit will fire up only by using the button whose type is submit. If the button type is given as button, it is not going to submit. That means what is the next rule is the form must be configured with on submit event. And that submit can be done only through submit button. You know, in HTML, other buttons cannot submit the form. So only the button type must be what? Submit. So form can be submitted. So form can be submitted only with on submit, configured for form, configured for form element. So submit action triggers only with, so only with the button, only with button type submit. So here lot of other questions are there, I will tell you. That means because we are learning forms, so many concepts will come. Means in interviews they ask, without a submit button, how to submit the form? Because sometimes what happens is in websites, what they do, they will ask you select a city. When you select a city, immediately the form submits and gets your city details. You don't need to click the submit button. It is submitted automatically whenever you choose a drop down value. That means on any element, form can be submitted, but not directly. For that, we need some logic to write and to handle the submit functionalities. We will see how to manage. But initially, we have to learn how to design a form and how to collect the data from the form and submit, which already we done. We defined initial values. We are collecting the data from the form. I entered some details like this and I added some details and click on submit. Those details will come. So we are collecting the data and we are submitting the data here. Now, while working with the forms, now very important, today we will see form validation. How we can handle the form validation. Form validation. Actually, in the modern UI technologies, front-end development like React and all these things, when we are learning HTML, CSS, and building user interface with React, there are so many techniques to implement for validation. So in HTML, CSS, you might have learned some. Now we can use them in our validation process. We can use them. And React have its own concept also. You can use both combinations also. What you learned in HTML, I will show you that point. That means what you can use in that concept. First point, what is validation? Validation is the process of verifying user input. So why you need validation? Validation is required to make sure that contradictory and unauthorized data is not get stored into the database. So when user inputs some data, verify and make sure that that is the data that we are expecting. And make sure that that is the correct authorized data we are expecting. And then allow it to store. So actually, validations can be done server side and client side both. Several technologies manage both. What is problem in client side JavaScript and jQuery and Angular and React validation is they depend on browser. If a browser disables JavaScript, you know that browser can disable JavaScript. I showed you in the first session. If browser disables JavaScript, client-side validation will not work. Your React itself will not work. When browser disables JavaScript, there is no chance. Then developers have to write both client-side as well as server-side. That means server side, their technologies will teach them how to write the validation, .NET, Java, Python, PHP, all these. So validation is the process of verifying user input. Validation is required to ensure that contradictory and unauthorized data is not get stored into the database. Validation is required to ensure that contradictory and unauthorized data is not get stored into the database. Contradictory data is nothing but you are expecting number, they are sending a string. That means the type is not matching. That is not the data you are expecting. Unauthorized means you said 7, they entered 8. That is not authorized. So validation is required. So user interface, user interface in the front end technologies can be configured, can be configured with various types of validation techniques, can be configured with various types of validation techniques. So it is not necessary that you have to depend on only specific. So we can handle on different. So what are the different techniques? I hope some of the techniques you learned in your HTML and CSS. Actually, what are the techniques you learned in HTML, CSS also? We can have validation. So you have HTML and CSS validation. I hope you people learned about how we can handle the validation with just HTML and CSS. That means without writing any script, without writing any script, you can manage your validations. Without writing the script, you can handle validation. That means without writing a programming, right? So you can validate by using HTML and CSS. How we can do that? One of the advantages is HTML5 provides various validation attributes, validation attributes for elements. HTML5 provides various validation attributes for elements. What are the validation attributes in HTML you learned? Validation attributes in HTML you learned. One is min length. So we have what? Required. Required max length is not validation. Max length is a restriction. We have min, we have max. So we have another important validation. We have email. These are types actually. So email, URL, right? So email, URL, number. These are all what? This all comes under the category of what? Types. Attributes, types, and you have an pattern. These are all the validation attributes of HTML. That means just with HTML, you can validate. You don't need to write much. So that is what HTML teaches you, that we can reduce the usage of script. So in certain occasions, we can manage that. And for that, we have min length, required max length, and all these are HTML attributes. So generally, you know these already. What are the options here? For example, this is in React we are doing. Suppose you see that here, I am trying to submit the data. When I try to submit the data, it is submitting all empty. It is submitting all empty. So what I am doing here is I am using a required. I am using a required. When I am using a required for that name, and you see here, I click on submit, it validates. No script, nothing. You don't need any script to write. So you don't need any script to write. Obviously, we know this. That's what in HTML we have learned. That means you don't need any script or any logic to write. So we have ready-made HTML attributes. So I'm using like min length. Min length is how much? Min length is suppose 4. That means now here I entered some name and you see submit. It says please lengthen the text to 4. So that means these attributes are already working. These attributes are already working. These attributes are already validating. They are doing the validation. That means HTML have validation attributes. For example, so here we have to enter some details like, so I will put another term. So this is like mobile and data definition. This is vendor contact something. So vendor contact. So, and we have a text box. Input type is equal to text and on change is equal to formic dot what handle change and the name is equal to so vendor. Okay. Here I will add one more initial value. What is the initial value? Vendor. I'm expecting a phone number, which is a string. Why? Because in this phone number, I will put a placeholder. So plus 91 and 10 digits, something like this we have. So that is the phone number vendor contact we want to handle. Now this vendor contact is also mandatory and it should match plus 91 and 10 digits. Then usually what we do, we will put a what required and we will put a pattern. You learn the patterns how to write. So slash plus 91 slash D and 10 digits. These are HTML things. In after all general HTML, you can manage your validation. That means now you return that and you know when I entered here submit, it is saying fill this field. Okay, we will fill that field. After that, I click submit. It says fill this field. Okay, I will fill the field 987654321 and I submit. It is not matching the pattern because according to the pattern, it should start with plus 91. Now it is okay. You can submit that. That means you don't need any logic. You don't need to write anything. Just you need to put your HTML attributes. It can validate. These are very basic things. That means HTML provides different types of validation attributes and you can use them. So just we can implement them in our page. So that means syntactically, suppose we have an input type is what some text. So what we are doing here, name is equal to mobile. Then we said required and we use a pattern is equal to slash plus 91 slash D and 10 digits number. Just a simple 91. So that is a simple concept of how you can put your validations. That means in the web development process, the validation techniques, there are so many. Now, these are HTML5 validation attributes. And I hope you learned CSS. CSS provides various validation classes. CSS provides various validation classes. CSS provides various validation classes to, to configure styles. So to configure styles for different validations, to configure styles for different validations. You might have learned this also. That means in CSS, we have ready-made validation classes. By using these validation classes, we can easily handle the validation. That means HTML validation attributes with combination of CSS validation classes. What are the CSS validation classes you have? CSS validation classes we have like required. You know why I'm writing colon? Because classes are inherited with a colon, right? Required. We have optional. We have in range. We have out of range. So we have valid and we have invalid. These are the validation classes of CSS. Required, optional, in range, out of range. You have checked. We have disabled. These disabled and all state related. These are. So read only, right? This all comes under. This all comes under what? Checked, disabled. These are state related. Because checked state, disabled state, read only. So we already have a focus. These are all state related actually classes. The state related classes and this. Optional, in range, out of range, valid, invalid, checked. These are all CSS classes. In CSS, you learn these classes to manage your validations. So, for example, now you see here in this means how we use the combination actually. Remember, this is not at all any React. These are not React validation, but React uses it because we don't waste our time with React logic for certain validations which we can simply manage with HTML. We don't write separate libraries, functions, and all, time waste. So you have to just use these ready-made in implementation. Where it is not possible with your HTML, CSS, there we go with React. Right? So the point is here, how here you see, now in this form that I designed, what are the fields which are required fields? Which field is a required field? In this, which field is a required field? How do I know? Until or unless I submit, I don't know. There is no visually clarity on which field is required. So what we do now here is for and that required they may change dynamically. Then what I will do here is beside this input, I will put a span and I will put a star. So beside every input, I am using a span and I am keeping a star. That means beside every input, I am doing it. So here it is available. and these checkboxes are, we can use them later. Okay. Here we put a span and we put a star. Okay. Now what should happen here is, here you can see there are star marks there. But those star marks must be displayed. Those star marks must be displayed only for the fields which are required. Actually, price is not required. If price is not required, then why star mark is there? Because default span will display. Then how do you manage this? So what we do generally, we will add a CSS now. So formic demo dot what CSS. I'm adding a CSS file and we need to link the CSS file. And here we have to import. Import what? Dot slash formic demo dot CSS. Okay. In that CSS file, now I am writing input and I am implementing a class if input is optional. If input is optional, then if input is optional, then I will use plus span, which indicates the adjacent span. You know, plus tilde, these are all the selector related options. Huh? Plus indicates the adjacent span. Adjacent span, so its color. So optional means we will just put display as what? None. That means if it is optional, don't show it. Okay, if input is set with required, then the span should display inline. Display inline means just beside, and color must be red. Color must be red. And you can see that they will be automatically set to only these two fields. Name field is having a star mark and mobile is having a star mark. And remember, what I do, I go in the form and for this name field, I remove the required. I am not setting a required validation. I removed required, then the star mark will be gone. That means the star mark will be displayed only for the field that you have mentioned as required. Later, if dynamically also, if you are changing, then automatically that design updates. That means here we are configuring, suppose price as required. This is price as required. Then for price, it will come. For price, I am removing. Then it is hidden now. It's not there. So you define required, then automatically it will come. So no logic, nothing much required here. We just use some CSS styles. Your HTML and your CSS are enough. Now in future, some more CSS versions are coming, which will almost 80-90% eliminate JavaScript logic of validation. And their new features are coming into CSS, which will use lot of inbuilt functions and classes so that you can manage your validation without any script. Right. So already we have several points. So now, not only this, for example, I not just want to display this red star mark. I want that field itself red. I want the field itself red. Then you know what to do, what you will do. So here you will write what? If input is what? Optional, then we put a border. So border we will set as, so optional not required. Directly we will put as what? Required. If input is required, we will put a border as 1 pixel solid red color. Then it is going to set that for input fields also. For the input fields, it will put the red color, right? You are setting the color red for that. That is important. Another point here is that means you see you are defining this. And obviously, for example, we are not writing anything there. Then it should display some message saying that name required. It should display some message saying that mobile required. Or suppose you are typing, this is okay. Suppose I am typing the mobile number. When I am typing the mobile number, so then automatically when I am typing, this should be hidden because I am satisfying the required. And we need to show messages, all these things. Then generally what we do, we will put another option here. What is that is, now if they satisfy the required by typing something, that means you see, you said that it is required. That's okay. I click inside and I started typing some name. Then it should not be there anymore. It should not display that anymore because already you satisfied that. Then how do you verify whether required validation satisfied or not? Then what you do, we write what? Input. If input is valid, valid means they matched the required. Required is an error and they have some value. That means it is valid now. If input is valid, then the span beside it should display none. If input is valid, it should not display anymore. That means now what happens here is you click and start typing something. It will not be there. That star mark will not be there. And if you don't type anything, then automatically it will come. When you type something, then it will be hidden. This is pure HTML. No logic, nothing. This is HTML, CSS. That means we are not writing any script or anything. We can even display a message. We can display a message. For example, how you display a message. So inside that name field, after this span, so we will use a div. In the div, we will say name required. After the span, we are using a div name required. Now, what should happen is, if it is, how do you write now? So, if input is invalid, that means if input is not valid, then what should happen? Tilde div. Why tilde div? Because div is not adjacent to the text box. It is somewhere after the text box. Then you access it by using a tilde. If it is immediately after, you access with plus. Plus is adjacent. Huh? So the tilde div should display as block. It should display as block, color as what? Red. And if input is valid, then the div display should be none. Don't show that div. That means now you can see that here there is name required. And you click inside and you start typing, it is hidden. And you are removing it and it is going to display. It is going to display. That means you can set up the validation. We can set up the validation and you can write the validation. The same thing you do for this mobile. So for mobile, what we are doing is here, just add a div now because already your styles are working. Just you add a div here and say invalid mobile plus 91 and 10 digits, something like this we define. Now you can see that here it says invalid mobile. When I am typing that, it is invalid mobile 98765432110. and you go here and enter plus 9, 1, now it is fine. If anything is not matching, then it will display that. It is going to display that. This is the validation. And again, same color should be normal. That means I haven't written a logic for that. That means if it is valid, then the text box color should be normal. So what we do, if input is what? Valid. Then what is the border? Border we will set to 1 pixel normal as what? Black. So solid and black. That means just normal we are defining. That will be normal. If input is valid, that is normal. We can put green colors, anything we can define. And this is what HTML and CSS will teach you. That these days in modern web designing, we don't need your .NET, Java's logics or JavaScript logics also to write for handling simple validations. We can manage everything with just basic HTML and CSS. But there are certain issues because HTML, CSS classes, they are not enough to validate everyone. Because how you will check whether a drop down is selected with a value or not? Can you use required for a drop down? Not possible. You cannot use required attribute for a drop down. It's not possible. You cannot use a required attribute for a radio and a checkbox. Radios and checkbox are used for checked. For example, you see, if I don't select the checkbox, we can have a lot of logics actually. So if I select the checkbox, for example, let's say we are giving the submit button. So here we are adding a text area. And here better I say, I keep this button also in the data list term. In the data term, we have terms of service. Terms of service, data definition, we have a text area button. And below the text area, some breaks I will give. And BR, okay. After that, text area will have some paragraph and we keep it as disabled. Okay. Rows is 4, calls is some 40. So that's the point given. And here I given a input type as checkbox. And we have a label I accept. So that is the basic of this. Okay, now. And let's keep some break again. This is some terms of service we are giving. We have some terms of service here. So I will keep here text area. Actually, this text area is not having the data. We'll set it as a value. Now this is all the text content. Now what should happen in this form is actually, I hope one break looks enough. Okay. Now in this, what is the point? What is the point is, if I don't accept, then this submit should not display. The submit should display only when I select I accept. When I accept, then submit should display. Otherwise, it should not display. That means I don't want to show the submit form, submit button. I don't want to show the submit button. Okay, I don't want to show the submit button. Then you know how do we write for that? What we do? So how to access the checkbox? There are so many checkboxes. So we will do one thing. For this checkbox, we will put a class or an ID. So class as what? This is class name. Class name is what? Terms. Okay. And I am accessing dot what? Terms. Terms is a checkbox. And if checkbox is checked, if the checkbox is checked, if the checkbox is checked, then tilde button, that means the button that comes after the checkbox, its display should be blocked. That means it should show it. If the terms, that means if it is not checked, then the tilde button, the button which is present after the checkbox, its display should be what? None. That means now you can see that button is not there. And when I select, I accept, then the button will come. And I am not selecting it, the button will be disappeared, right? This is pure HTML CSS. No JavaScript involved in this, no React involved in this, nothing. That means you can show a validation message, hide a validation message. You can show a element, hide a element. We can display messages. These all are done by using simple technique. You can add lot of effects. Suppose when I selected the checkbox, this must be green color. Otherwise, it must be red color. That means you add the effects dot terms. The terms, beside the terms, there is a label. So that label, so color should be red and it should turn to green terms. It should turn to green when this is checked. Then the label should turn to green. Color is what? Green. And you can see that here I accept is in red. And when I select I accept, then it will turn to green and it is going to show you this button. That means we can just manage by using this. So this is all your HTML, CSS for validation. So HTML, CSS will teach you all this, how to validate your forms, how to design a form, because the modern HTML and CSS have lot of things. You don't need a script until or unless you need some complex interactions. So that means you can even manage mouse over, mouse out. You can even manage mouse down, mouse up like actions. For that, you have ready-made CSS classes. So you can manage blur, you can manage focus, right? For example, what we have to do, suppose I clicked inside this price, it should show me a warning saying that price range must be from 5,000 to 10,000. When I clicked inside, when I click outside, it should be hidden. While I click inside and started typing something, it should give me a warning. Then how do you write that? So generally what we do now here for price, here we have a price. For price, we will put a div and we will say that, so this div will have a class name. Div have a class name text warning. And I will put a BI exclamations triangle, exclamation triangle. And here I will give a message that, so price 5,000 to 10,000 only. So that is the price I am defining. And what is the point here? You can see I need to show that here. And when to show that, when we need to show that here, that price must be displayed. That means what we have to do, we need to put the validation. This time here, this is an input. How you set the validation for that now? So this is the message, and you can see usually the message is not displayed because we don't have any validation. That means it should display when you click inside it. That is our point, right? When I click inside it, it should display. So for this, I will put an ID. ID is what? Some price. How to access by using ID selector? You know, ID selector is accessed by using an hash. What is it? Price. If price becomes a focus, if it becomes focus, then the tilde div should display as what? Block. Display as block. What is that focus? When you click inside, it will show. That means currently it is not showing. I click inside the price, it will show me that warning. And you know that this is focus. And when I click outside, now this is fine. This is focus. We can display on focus. So these are, more classes are there. We have focus. What are other classes we are having? We have a hover class. We have an active class. Hover class means mouse over, right? Active class means mouse down, mouse down. These are all state related classes and all these options. So validation can be defined. Validation can be defined by using this. Now here, one more concept is, this is not enough every time. So for various types of elements, we cannot manage with just HTML and CSS. First, I will give you here an example up to this. So this is the formic demo. Formic demo dot what? CSS. In formic demo CSS, we written lot of CSS classes. These are all the classes for input optional, input required, input valid, invalid, focus, all these options we use. Second one is formic demo dot what? JSX. In the JSX, let me copy this. This is JSX. So that is the JSX here. Okay. Now, this is not enough to handle everything. This is not enough to handle everything. That is the reason. Now, what you can do is, we can use formic validation technique. Validation technique. We can use the formic validation technique because certain validations we cannot manage with the CSS classes and HTML attributes because some are not suitable for your elements. So like I told you, drop down radios, these cannot have required. Then how you will verify whether they selected or not? How to handle whether they selected or not, right? How do you verify that they checked or not? So here, checked already I showed you. Drop down radios and checkboxes can be verified by using a CSS class called checked. Checked will verify whether they selected or not. But what is drawback of CSS validation is, CSS, even when the validation failed, so means HTML. So validation failed, it will show some messages which are not suitable. However, we kept our own messages, but some messages, what happens? They will automatically display some messages which will say that please match the pattern. please fill out this field. Those messages are not pleasing. We want our own messages. We want our own validation to do. So Formic have two techniques in validation. What are the two techniques in validation is Formic provides, Formic provides two types of validation techniques. Two types of validation techniques. It provides two types of validations techniques. The one is validate and validate schema. So validate uses a function, that validates the input values and returns an error object. Validate uses a function. Validate uses a function. It uses a function. And validate schema. Validate schema. It uses a built-in library that provides schema. Schema means structure. It provides a built-in library that provides schema structure for validation. So we have 2 points. First one is validate. Validate means what? You write the validation manually again. Second one is schema. Schema means already validations are written through some libraries. You just attach them. That means what is the second schema is we don't need to write the validation logic. In the first case, we have to write the validation logic. In the second case, we don't need to write the validation logic. We don't need to write the logic. So that is technically, right? So we will see both how to use validate and how to use the validation schema. For example, now see, first I will add in this existing form. Suppose if user is not selecting a city, that means I am entering some data and all these things. When user is not selecting a city, if user is not selecting a city, then it should show a message, please select a city. And remember, in this, all three are options only. First one is also an option. How the drop down knows that first option is not a city? First one is also an option. Second one is also option. Third one is also option. All are options only. Then how drop down knows that first one is not a city? It doesn't know. It thinks that also city. But we have to explicitly tell that the first one that you have chosen is not a city. Or the fourth one or the second one you chosen is not available. We need to tell that. How you can do that? So how we can manage this? Usually we need to write our own validation. How to write the validation? Formic requires a function. So you have to write one function. The function name I will give as validate form. That is the function name. Your own name, any name for the function. Now what this validate form will do? this validate form will collect the fields. That means that function will collect the form data. Form data is nothing but it contains a collection of form data is an object. That means this form data is nothing but it is an object. And this object maps to whom? This object maps to initial values. It maps to initial values. Initial values is also an object, na? That means in initial values, whatever data is there, that data, it will come here. Now what we have to do? We have to verify the data. Whether the data that is sent is according to our requirement or not, we have to verify and we have to report an error if it is not matching. That means now what happens is this function should have errors object. This errors object will have error about name. It will have error about price. It will have error about city. It will have error about stock. Remember, these are error messages. So all are string type messages there. They are not data types, right? And here we have vendor. Vendor is also an error. That means these are the errors our form have to return. That means this function have to return errors in these fields. That means what the form have to do, it should return those errors object. It should return the errors object. It should return the errors object. What errors object contains? That means validate form is returning all these errors. Validate form is returning all these errors. Name error, price error, city error, stock error, vendor error. Actually, we don't all of them because some already we return through HTML and CSS. But later I will show you here how to write with this also. But now see, what is the form data coming? Form data have name, form data have price, and form data have city. And observe city is binded with a drop down. This is the city drop down option. This option value is -1. That means it doesn't belong to city. That is a traditional. You can give any name. XYZ, ABC, anything you can give. I given -1 because it is a traditional programming concept to tell that it is not a member of this list. Because member of list will start with index number how much? 0, 0, 1, 2. Right? So index. So this we are saying that it doesn't belong to cities. That means if the selected option value is -1, what does it means? If the selection option is -1, what does it means? It means that they haven't selected a city. They haven't selected a city. If they selected this one, the value will be Delhi. If they selected this one, the value will be Hyderabad. But they selected the first one, that means they haven't selected anything. That means now what we have to do is we have to go here and we need to write the logic. What is the logic? If form data have a key, what is the key? City. If form data dot city, that city is equal to -1. If it is equal to -1, then what should happen? What should happen? Errors dot city. There I should display a message saying that please select a city. Otherwise, if it is not -1, errors dot city, in that message will be empty. We don't show any message. That is what the city error. That means now we created a function. This function is having all errors, but currently we return error for drop down. If drop down is selected, so that means when they are changing the drop down, when drop down is changing and they are not selecting a city, then it will show this message. Now this function, remember, this errors is returned by this function. Function is returning those errors. Now formic have to use that error. That means now formic have a key called validate. It is having a key validate and validate schema. Both are there. Currently, we are using validate. Validate using which function? The function name. Only name of the function. Which function is having the validation errors? The function name. We created a function called validate form. It should use that validate form function. That means what validate form will do? Validate form will return the errors and formic will use those errors. Now formic can report those errors. Formic can report those errors in a simple way. How it can report the errors is, below this I will put a data definition. Here I want to display the error. How to display the error? It is very simple. We have to use formic dot errors. Errors related to which field? City related errors. You bring that error and display here. That means now you see here. So I'm refreshing this. Yeah. And I'm having some data entered. And you see I'm selecting a city. So select city. It should show please select a city. Of course, color I haven't given. So for this, what is the color? Class name, text, what? Danger. Then what it is going to do is it is going to show that in red color. And I selected the city. It's not there. I'm not selecting the city. It will display. That means remember, you may get so many doubts like, sir, if I do like this, what will happen? Nothing will happen. You have to write logic for that. If you do like that, if you do like this, those are all not questions at all, because have you written anything for that? No. Then how it will work? If I want like this, what to do? What to do? Write logic for that. You have to write logic for every situation that you want. You need to write. Automatically, it will not work, right? So now I have written the validation. I have written the validation manually. And how we did return the validation? By using a validate form, validate function. So this you can do for name, price, everyone. That means how do we write for name? How, suppose if anybody asked you like, without using HTML required, how you will verify whether it is required or not? Obviously, we will write a logic now. What we will write? If a form data dot what? Name is equal to what? Empty. If it is empty, or we can write dot length. Length is equal to 0. Means it is not having any value. Then what we will do? We will put errors dot name. What is the error? What we will do? Name required. Otherwise, else we will say error dot name is equal to empty. We can write multiple logics, right? So if name is entered, we can write another condition. So what is the condition? If form data dot name dot length is less than 4. Am I right? If less than 4, then errors dot name we will put, so name min 4 characters. Otherwise, we will display this one. We can add any condition. We can write any logic. You can write a switch or a if, anything. That means now you do this. When we will do this, you will do this when you are not writing, this required. When you are not writing this required. And this time what you can do, simply you can get. So I will remove this required. I will even remove this div, name required, not required. So what we will do, we will put a data definition here. We have to display, what is it? Formic dot errors dot which one? Name related error. That means now we have a name related error to display here. That means the name related error should come here. And I think we haven't written a string length. I'll just keep because the value is not there. Name have a length equal to, no? Not assignment. We are using assignment. Okay. So it is not assignment. It is what? Verifying, right? So, and you see here, so when we say, you can see name is required now. Color also we will give a color also we will give. What is the color? So for this, we will put as what? Text danger. Okay. Now you will see here. Now it is name required. I'm entering the name and it says, so it says that minimum 4 characters. And I satisfied minimum 4 characters. Now it is fine. So minimum 4 characters not there. Name is not there. It will get the message and display. This is manually you writing the validation. Previous one is through HTML we are dealing. So now we are writing the validation function. So what is the basic syntax here is what we have to do. We need to first write a function. Validate form. And we need form data. And we need an errors object. We have name error, so we have price error. That example I will give you, but just roughly. And we need to write the logic for validating fields. After that, we need to return errors. Then in formic, is equal to use formic. Now what we do in use formic, we need to set up the name. So, sorry, this is having what? Initial values. And it is having validate. This is validate form. So on submit, uses a function. This just syntax and how you show the errors. Formic dot errors dot the name. Right. So example, I will just give this formic demo dot what? JSX. Demo dot JSX. This is the example. So in this example, I have used the formic validation part. Now we have more convenient techniques. That means without writing the functions, already functions are present, we can use them. That makes more simple. That means we have more simple concepts. We will learn about them. That we'll see in next session. Next session again on Monday, right? Again on Monday. On Monday session, we will discuss about how to handle the more validations and concepts. Okay. Monday we will continue. Tomorrow no session. Well, again session will be on Monday. Okay.